Hello and welcome everyone to today's conversation on coaching certification. Thank you so much for the privilege of being part of your research in this exploration. I'll share with you, probably I went through something very similar to what you're doing when I first started learning about coaching and had people mention coaching to me. Oh, you should be a coach and that kind of thing. I'm guessing many of you heard that as well. I thought, okay, I'll find out what this is. And I started researching. I actually invested 6 months in researching different coaching certification programs. So I get that there's a ton of information out there. Sometimes it can be overwhelming and confusing. So what we want to do here is, of course, answer your questions, give you the information, share, yes, about our program. We'll give that information at the end. And in the meantime, it's what do you want to know? Wherever you go for your coaching certification, what do you want to know? What's going to be important, etc. So the agenda for the conversation ideally is addressing many of the questions. Several of you submitted questions ahead of time, and yes, I believe those are built in here. Of course, we do want to take additional questions as we go. So if you have a question, we have two options. One is that you can type it into the control panel, and I will monitor that. You have a place where you can enter questions. And then the other option is every once in a while we get somebody brave and you want to come on live and ask your question. We can do that too. And the way I'll know that you want to do that is if you raise your hand. So in your control panel, there's a little picture of a hand, and currently it has a red or a green arrow next to it. If you want to put your hand up, you click the green arrow. If you want to put your hand back down, you click the red arrow next to it. And that way you can let me know, hey, I got a question, and I can unmute you. So in the meantime, what are we going through? We're going to start out by defining coaching. That's important. We'll share some industry statistics and insights. Hey, what is the information that's out there? Then we're going to walk through the Staircase to Success coaching model and coaching process to give you a sense of one approach in terms of that coaching relationship. We will talk pros and cons of certification. Of course, it'd be nice to say it's all pros, that's everything. And the reality is, and we get it, there are cons as well. We will discuss the reasons people choose certification at the Center for Coaching Certification. We'll talk about what to look for in a training program wherever you go. We'll talk about opportunities for coaches, and then of course a review of the Center for Coaching Certification program. And I do at the end have something for each and every one of you, because I get that you're investing your time being here, and so I want to return that and give something back to you at the end. All right, first off, definition of coaching. To let you know, this comes from the International Coach Federation, and I will give you some information on that organization in a moment. Definitely worth reading on their website and learning more. So the definition itself, I love it because the language really gives a significant insight in terms of what coaching is all about. So it starts out by calling it a strategic partnership. So this is unique and different in the terms of being a professional service provider, because in most professions, the professional that's hired is an expert, and they're the ones who have the answers and they give the information. Whereas in coaching, we call it a strategic partnership because the client is their own best expert. And so the coach is partnering with them in the exploration process. So what that means is that the coach, it goes on to say, empowers the client to clarify goals. In other words, the client is clarifying their own goals. Create action plans. They develop the steps and move past obstacles so they achieve what the client chooses. It's truly a focus on that individual client, empowering them, putting them in charge of being their own best expert and figuring out what they're going to do and how. So that's exciting in and of itself, because think about it this way. How many times have you gotten together with friends and maybe somebody's got a challenge and you give them this really great answer, the solution to it, and you know they love you and trust you, and they don't do it? It happens a lot. We see that all the time. And ultimately, when people figure out their own answer, that is when they're going to follow through. That is when they're going to make it happen. So the definition in and of itself is great in terms of what coaching is about. And in the meantime, a question came in. Are we going to share the slides with you? What we will do is put a copy of this recording on the YouTube channel, and we will send you a link directly to that, so you'll have access to the recording after the fact. So thank you for that question. All right. I said I'd share with you more about the Center for, or the International Coach Federation. Who are they? What is this organization? So coaching currently is what we call an uncontrolled profession. What that means is that technically, legally, anyone can call themselves a coach, literally. If my dog hangs out a shingle and says she's a coach, if somebody hires her, she's in business. At the same time, think about what every profession has gone through. You see, hundreds of years ago, doctors simply said, hey, I'm a doctor, and they started practicing medicine. Is that what happens now? Of course not. Now they get trained, educated, etc. The same is true for attorneys, for HR professionals and talent development professionals. It is true for counselors. It's true for accountants. Every profession out there goes through this growth process where the profession either successfully self-regulates or they become regulated by government agencies. So coaching is in that stage of growth as a profession. And currently, we are self-regulated. And the largest organization in terms of self-regulation for coaching is the International Coach Federation. Now, there are other organizations out there. The good news is they all talk to each other and collaborate. The International Coach Federation as an individual organization is the largest. They're the biggest in the United States, Canada, where most of you are from. There are some large organizations in some of the European countries, and they do, as I mentioned, collaborate with the International Coach Federation. So in terms of self-regulation, this really is our gold standard. So who, what beyond that? They are a nonprofit organization. The coaching professionals are members of this organization. They're the gold standard in terms of coaching, in terms of ethics. They hold members accountable to the code of ethics. They also have standards. They approve training programs, and they have standards for becoming a member of the organization. They require 60 hours of training in order to become a member of the organization. Now, there is a difference between becoming a member of the International Coach Federation and being credentialed with the International Coach Federation. So when you think about credentialing, to clarify what the difference is, think about membership as if you have your degree. Okay, I got my degree. And then credentialing is like saying, okay, now I have a master's or a doctorate level degree. So the membership itself is the base, and then you build on that with a master's or a doctorate, which in this case equates to credentialing. So we'll talk more about that process as time allows in this conversation. For now, let's dig into, okay, if a company is going to use a coach, what are the reasons? Right Management says 86% of the time it is to sharpen the skills of individuals who are targeted as future leaders. Then Denison Consulting calls coaching the organizational development tool of choice for leaders and emerging leaders. It's big, it's hot, it's definitely out there. Ray Williams calls it the second fastest growing profession in the world. First being IT, information technology. So second fastest growing in the world, and that has been the case. And the reason coaching is so hot and growing is because it works. Fortune magazine looked at a number of research studies. So sometimes you have big corporations that say, hey, if we're going to invest all this money in coaching, we want to make sure we're getting our money out of it. And they will actually hire outside companies to come in and do research studies on that. The International Coach Federation will also do that. Hey, we've got to establish the credibility of what it is we do as a profession, so they hire an outside organization to study it and research it. Fortune magazine looked at a number of the different studies, and the average payoff based on what they looked at was 6 times what the coaching cost the company. 6 times. Okay, that's 600% ROI, everyone. When you think about a number like that, it's number one, it's astounding. How can any profession have that much of an impact? That's incredible. It's off the charts in terms of the return on investment. At the same time, when you think about that, it's like, okay, if the return on investment is that high, how can you afford not to have a coach? It totally makes sense to have coaching. And this speaks to the reason it is such a hot profession and growing so much. So Harvard Business Review writes about coaching fairly consistently, and they do research on it and study it. So they, same thing, said, okay, if a company is going to hire a coach, what are the reasons that the company is going to hire a coach? Well, the top reason, very much in keeping with what Right Management said, is to develop high potentials or to facilitate a transition, leaderships in their roles. So 48% of the time, that is the reason companies hire a coach. Then 26% of the time, they'll hire a coach to act as the sounding board. This makes a ton of sense when you think about the C-suite, your top level executives. Having a coach means they have an opportunity to think out loud. They are with someone who is going to expand their thinking and, yes, challenge their thinking, which in turn makes them more effective in their leadership role. Now, a lot of people say, well, I thought coaching is if there's a problem. 12% of the time coaching is brought in to address a derailing behavior. Now, let me push on this. Think about it this way. If a company is going to invest in a coach, it's kind of like saying, hey, you get the corner office with the window. You have arrived, because coaching is an expensive proposition. So using it to address a derailing behavior means, hey, this is somebody we want to save. They're really good. We simply have to address something that's getting in the way. And coaching is a tool in that case. Now, a fascinating highlight came out of this study. Somewhat unexpected by some people, and I think it makes a ton of sense. I'm guessing you will too when you really reflect on it. Executive coaching, workplace, that kind of thing, 76% of the time, personal issues get addressed. Okay, so the reflection part of that, whatever we have going on in our own lives, whether it's health, financial, relationship, whatever it is, it does affect us on the job. It affects our focus, our motivation, our productivity. So it makes sense that personal issues get addressed when you have these coaching engagements. What's so important here is that the coach really gets their role and knows how to support this process effectively. Okay. Another study, International Coach Federation sponsored this, and they said, okay, if an individual is going to hire a coach as compared to a company, what are the reasons for the individual? Well, most common was career coaching. And this makes a lot of sense when you look at when they did the study. People were getting out of college, launching their careers, and big challenges because it's a very competitive marketplace out there. You also have a lot of people that are mid-career going, okay, am I really on the path I want to be on? How do I advance it, or how do I change paths? And so career coaching is very, very hot. Another big area is business management. A lot of people love the idea of being the entrepreneur, and they're really good at the product or the service they are selling in their business. And their challenge is managing the business. How do they effectively create the infrastructure, support the sustainability of their business, grow it effectively, etc.? How do they manage that side of it? So having a coach there is a powerful tool for their success. Now, another big reason individuals hire a coach is self-esteem. And what's interesting about this is how much this is a factor. Come on, bottom line, we're all human. What does that mean? That means more often than not, the number one thing getting in our way is ourselves. And when we look at that, it's about confidence, belief in our own ability to do something, in our worthiness to achieve it. And so self-esteem makes a ton of sense in terms of having a coach. Another big area, you've probably heard this buzzword for a long time, work-life balance. Yes, that's been around forever, and it's as much or more of a challenge now. We're doing more with less. And so how are people effectively creating that balance? And of course, how you define balance is different. How are you managing your work time, your life time, which means family, it means your own personal time, in a way that supports you sustaining what you're doing and continuing to achieve success. So these are motivators for individuals. Now let's go back into that bottom line impact. So you saw the one article from the magazine. One of the studies I'm guessing they looked at, it's the most commonly cited study, was done by Manchester Inc. And they said coaching has a return on investment of 570%, right in there with that average that we looked at from Fortune magazine. So fascinating. And there are a number of different studies. If you want to go out and get on the internet and search, Manchester is worth looking at. Metrics Global did a study. Another one that I think is fascinating and absolutely amazing was done by Triad Performance Technologies. And they looked very specifically at sales coaching in the telecommunications industry. And when they looked at that, the return on investment was 1,000%. And what's so cool about that study is sales numbers. It's a very quantifiable item. And so the research on it really backs up the power of what coaching is doing. That return on investment is phenomenal. Now I'll share another study with you. If you look at a training program, you get a 22.4% improvement in productivity in the workplace. So we're measuring just productivity. Now, if you combine training with coaching, you get an 88% productivity gain. That's phenomenal, 4 times the impact. This study was done by Public Personnel Management. So fascinating. And think about it. It goes back to the definition we started with. Coaching really is about putting the individual client in charge of figuring out what they want to do and how they're going to do it, and empowering them to create their own action plan, because they'll own it. And when they own it, they buy into it and you get the follow through. That is the reason we see these kinds of numbers. When somebody is choosing who to hire as a coach, so think about it, you're exploring coaching certification, putting yourself out there, how are they going to decide whether or not you're the right coach for them? Well, they look at most often 2 things, and again, this is from Harvard Business Review. They're looking at, number 1, your experience. So sometimes I have people come to me and say, well, I want to be an executive coach. Are you going to teach me about being an executive? I'm like, no, I'm going to teach about being a coach. Let's look at the difference here. When they say experience, are they looking for whether or not you went to school? No, they're looking for real life experience, work you've done. And so what they want to know is, do you have that experience in a similar setting? Chances are those of you who are on the call already bring that to the table. Whatever type of coaching you want, you've already got experience in education. So that's great. They also want to know that you have a clear methodology. That's where coach training comes in. In terms of coach training, they want, do you have the competencies for a coach? Do you have a process? Do you really know what you're doing as far as being a coach? That's what they're looking for, and that's where coach training adds to the experience and education you've already got. So let's look at what the relationship is when you move into a coaching engagement. The analogy we use is a staircase. So think about it this way. You decide you're going to build a staircase. Well, if you're going to build a staircase, what's the first thing you do? You build the framework for the staircase. In a coaching relationship, the framework that you're going to build, the first part, involves, yes, training. How many of you are willing to hire a professional service provider who has no training? Do you want to go hire an accountant who doesn't know how to do math? Do you want to hire a doctor who has no training on anatomy? So it's very significant. Whatever professional you're hiring, yes, you want to know they've been trained. That makes sense for us as coaches as well. And of course, through the training, we're developing competencies. So here's what happens. There are trainings out there that may or may not actually know what coaching is, even if they call themselves a coach training. So making sure it's developing the competencies of a coach. And we're going to walk through those as well. The International Coach Federation publishes that information, so we'll talk about it. And of course, a code of ethics. Now, what's interesting here is everybody says, well, I'm ethical. You know, that's not an issue. Of course you're ethical. You're here wanting to help people and make a difference. And the bottom line is we don't know what we don't know. We've all made mistakes thinking it was the right thing to do and then finding out later, oh, wait a minute, I hadn't thought about that perspective. So it's learning that. And there are significant differences as far as coaching in our code of ethics compared to other professional services. So it's very important to know what the ethics are and how they work. Then you're going to build the relationship itself, which equates to building the steps. The first step in a coaching relationship is to have an agreement, the agreement between the coach and the client. Hey, what is coaching? What are the roles? What are the responsibilities? How does this work, etc. So you establish your agreement with your client. The next step in building the coaching relationship or your staircase to success is understanding. It is incumbent on the coach to understand the client. Who are they? How do they think, process, and function? What are their circumstances? What's going on for them? What are their influencing factors, etc.? So having that full understanding of the client, because that in turn supports the next step of developing rapport. Rapport is about the coach understanding the client, flexing to them, making this process work for them, adjusting to the client. And it's about developing trust. It's about the intimacy of the conversation. Is the client comfortable openly discussing and sharing with the coach? And with that rapport, you then are effectively communicating. And communicating involves listening and listening deeply. What are they saying? What aren't they saying? What's behind what they're saying? What's the lens through which they're looking? And really getting that. And then asking powerful questions, because as a coach, the questions we ask are completely different than any other type of question in other professions. So knowing how to clearly, directly communicate and ask those powerful questions. This in turn supports the step of exploration, where the client is exploring what do they want, what are their barriers, what are their resources, what are their strategies, and how are they going to move forward, because they're defining strategies and action steps to take them to that doorway called success, and that success is defined by the client. So that's the model of how this coaching relationship functions. Let's talk specific process. So when you engage in a coaching relationship, oftentimes before you even start officially, quote unquote, before you sign an agreement, etc., it makes sense to offer what's called an introductory session. So an introductory session for coaches that are working inside of a company where part of your role is to coach other people in the company is to make sure, number one, it's a good match between the coach and the client, and number two, to make sure the client really is comfortable with what coaching is, how it works, and what it's going to do for them. So they get a chance to experience it and buy into the process itself. For those of you who are going into business as a coach and selling your services as a coach, in addition to the introductory session being an opportunity to make sure it's a good match between the coach and the client and to give that prospective client a chance to experience what coaching is like, that introductory session becomes in many ways a marketing tool as far as your services go. It's usually about 20-30 minutes. Now, after the introductory session, the client is making a choice. Do they want coaching? And if they do, you're signing an agreement with them and you move into an opening session. In the opening session, it's a big picture exploration. What do they want in all different areas? Because ultimately, as we discovered from the Harvard Business Review, personal issues often come up. And on top of that, whether or not we talk about them in the coaching relationship, they are influencing factors. There are considerations in terms of what they do based on outside areas. So that big picture exploration gives the understanding of the client and their influencing factors. It also supports prioritizing what really is important to them. And then in session 2, you move into, okay, how is the client going to maintain their focus and fully engage in creating change? Because creating change takes work. It's a process over time. How are they going to do that in a way that's supported? Because think about it this way. How many of you know someone that had a New Year's resolution and then 2 weeks later, they don't even remember what the New Year's resolution was, right? So how are you going to maintain that so they stay engaged with this? Now, on an ongoing basis in this coaching relationship, your general process is the client prioritizes what they want to focus on, work on. They strategize how they're approaching that, moving past obstacles, tapping resources. They're developing their action plan. And of course, as a coach, you're checking in on their progress and supporting them, acknowledging that and celebrating successes. Now, the coaching relationship on average is 12 months. Some relationships are shorter, some are longer. It does vary. Whatever it is, when the client gets to that point where they're saying, okay, I'm complete. And sometimes that's because, well, this is how much the budget allowed. Sometimes it's because I've achieved what I wanted. Sometimes it's because, I've really developed and solidified the habits that support me continuing this and moving forward independently. So in a case like that, you're saying, okay, as a coach, what do I want to do? Well, for sure, making sure that the client knows how they want to move forward, maintaining their progress and success for the long term. So you're supporting their planning for that. And in a closing session, you're checking in. Hey, what did they gain from coaching? You're checking in with them and making sure they're confident and comfortable moving forward after coaching, continuing to strategize. And we call it a closing session. It's also, hey, the door's open, because you will find that very often clients do come back, sometimes a year later, sometimes 2 or 3 years later. So that is the process itself. Now, certification, becoming a coach. We mentioned earlier, uncontrolled profession, and we also talked about the reality of we're self-regulating right now, and primarily through the International Coach Federation. So if you're thinking about getting certified as a coach, what are the pros, what are the cons, how important is this? So let's start with, how important is this? How much of a difference does it make? Well, when hiring a coach, 29% of the people said certification is very important. You got to have it or we don't even want to talk to you. At the same time, 28.5%, it doesn't really matter. Not important. It's more about, who's referring you, what's your background, that kind of thing. And then you've got 42% in the middle saying, well, it's somewhat important. Yeah, it matters. It's not the only thing. So it varies. When you crunch all of that together, you've got 70 plus people out there hiring a coach, assigning some level of value to certification. And here's what we're finding. As the profession continues to grow and get noticed, more and more people are saying, okay, we want someone who's certified. I thought it was really interesting. When I took out my professional insurance as a coach, I was asked by the insurance companies whether or not I was a member of the International Coach Federation. And it actually made a difference on my rates. And now I find as we do proposals to different companies and organizations, they're requiring certification. So this number is growing, it's increasing, and that's telling us, yeah, it is making a difference, having that training. And again, makes sense. If we're a professional and we want to be trained in what we do. So let's talk now, pros, cons. Start with the cons. Realistically, whenever you think about education or training for whatever it is, there are a couple of big cons: time and money. It takes time to get trained as a coach, and it costs money to get trained as a coach. Those are big factors. It'd be really nice to say, oh yeah, we can send 10 bucks in and have a certificate and we're done. And actually online, I think there are places that will do that, although if you're going to send 25 bucks or 10 bucks to somebody else, you can probably print one up for nothing, right? These are the cons: time and money. It is an investment. Well, if you've ever gone to school, whether it's grade school, high school, college, or beyond, you invested time and money in preparing yourself to effectively do whatever it is you do. So it makes sense. Yes, it's an investment. On the pro side, okay, for many people, it's a career advancement opportunity. Increasingly, we are seeing jobs where coach training is required or requested. For example, if you're in human resources, it is considered one of the sub-competencies of an HR professional. If you're in talent development, a member of ATD, they actually list coaching as a core competency for the profession. Organizational development calls it a tool of choice. If you do consulting of any type, you're probably hearing about coaching more and more often. If you're an advisor, you're probably finding that coaching makes sense in terms of your success because, as we talked about earlier, you tell people what to do and they don't really buy into it and follow through. When you take that coaching approach, they own it and follow through. Many times we are also seeing individuals who are in the workplace in a manager role, a supervisor role, some sort of leadership role, and the coaching skills are what are making a difference in terms of how effective they are. When you go out and start researching how do you develop leadership, people skills, communication skills, coaching skills, it's all right in there. So it's definitely an opportunity in terms of the career side, depending on what your profession is. Then, of course, it's a business opportunity because coaches that are in business for ourselves and making our services available, this gives us credibility saying, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I've got something backing me up on this. And so it's huge in terms of the business development. All right. when people choose coaching, training with the Center for Coaching Certification, what are the reasons? So it'd be nice to say I can give you the reasons everywhere. Where I obviously get the feedback is what they tell us. So here's what I'm hearing. Number one, they care about the credibility of an organization. When you're researching different training programs, checking that out. Another thing people talk about is the coaching tools. For example, knowing that there are things available to them both during training that they gain and acquire there and after the fact. Hey, what's in place there? The tools they can access and use in their coaching work. Another big one is ongoing support. Hey, when I graduate, what if I still have a question? What if I want to ask about something else? What if I want to do or continue something? What is the support that's available? And of course, that's so important because it's bigger than the training itself. It does go on and continue, so that's available. Professional development. So many times when you have a company that is supporting you going to a training program or even paying for a training program, they want to know, gee, what's the approval on that training program? They also want to know, are you going to earn continuing education credit? Because that is a significant factor in the decision process. So yes, that's available. Now, a really cool one is a lot of people are doing coach training for the personal development side of it as well, because you're learning skills that support you in whatever you do. So that's an exciting component. All right. In terms of digging into some of these reasons, look at the time and money factor. So one consideration is the level of training. There are programs out there that are a few hours. There are programs out there that take 10 years or more to complete. That's significant. So the International Coach Federation, our gold standard in coaching, says you got to have 60 hours to become a member. What does that mean? You're looking at options. Hey, I want to at the very least reach that level. So at the Center for Coaching Certification, we do that in 2 steps. We have the Certified Professional Coach Program, it's 30 hours, and then we have the Certified Master Coach Program, which is 35 hours. So sometimes people say, how come it's 2 steps? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, for those people that are doing this for personal development, this is about learning the basic skills, and that first 30 hours is what they want. Second off, there are a lot of people that are managing the time and budget considerations, so being able to do it in 2 steps gives you the space to manage the time and the budget. On top of that, you have a lot of people say, okay, I'm thinking about coach training. I want to make a decision in terms of what I'm doing. And that decision means I want to test it out, take that first level, and then decide if I'm going to continue. So it gives you that opportunity. Now, I love it because what that means is in the Certified Professional Coach Program, the depth and breadth of participants, people from all different areas with all different perspectives, adds tremendous value to the discussions we have in class. And in the Certified Master Coach, it's really honing in and going deeper and deeper on the coaching side of it. Now, location makes a difference. There are classes online. There are classes that require travel. So we offer both options. We do classes in major cities around the United States. Any city we go to, we'll go to typically once a year as far as that goes. And then the online program, you can do everything online. It's the same exact class. It's simply set up in terms of where you're meeting, online or in a physical space. So both options are available to you. Now, I did have somebody ask in the questions ahead of time, hey, if I'm an international student, how do I do this? For international students, most often they're looking at the online classes where you do complete everything from wherever you're at, and we add to our schedule for online classes throughout the year based on what the interest is, etc. etc. So there is a schedule page on the website where you can check that out. Now, I do have international students that will tie it into a trip to the United States. Of course, you have that option as well. I also have people that are in more remote locations that like to do that. So what happens is the class is in a blended format. There's 5 online classes, and then if it's one that is in a location, 2 of the days are face-to-face. So you do a blended format, and it makes it very feasible in terms of the travel. Now, cost, that's the other big consideration. There are programs that are a few days as low as $400 out there. Back to those longer ones, 20,000, yes. So it's absolutely across the board. At the Center for Coaching Certification, our certified professional coach program is 30 hours, and our certified master coach program, 35 hours, are at $16.95 and $18.95 respectively. And we're really excited about being able to keep the price point that low while offering the quality and really making it a valuable program. Now, whatever training you look for, and there are a lot of them out there. I mentioned the International Coach Federation. They have approved 300 or 400 different training programs. You have hundreds of choices. So the number one thing to look for, I'm going to say, is make sure it's ICF approved. Simple ICF approval tells you they've looked at the content of the training, what they're developing in terms of your skills, and it really is pertinent to coaching. Knowing that that gives you 300 or 400 choices means, yeah, it makes sense. You got lots of options there. Now, one of the big things the International Coach Federation looks at when they approve a training program is the core competencies. They've identified 11 core competencies. They're sorted into 4 different category areas. So whatever training program you are going to sign up for, make sure you're getting all 11 competencies. This is essential to your success as a coach. So the first category of competencies is setting the foundation. That includes the ethical guidelines and the coaching agreement. So when you look at a training program, make sure there is a class on ethics. And again, we talked about this. You come to the table as an ethical person. You want to help other people. It makes sense. And the Coaching Code of Ethics has some very significant differences in terms of how it works that until you take a class on it, we just don't know what we don't know. So make sure there's a class on ethics. Now, the agreement itself, part of that is really understanding what coaching is, what it isn't, what are the roles of a coach and the client, etc. How does it all work? And you also have the written side of that. So having a written agreement that you're going to use with clients. Does the coach training class you're going to take have a class where you're really understanding the parameters of coaching and how it works? And as part of the tools that are included, are they giving you examples of coaching agreements? Your second category of competency is called co-creating the relationship. So first in that is the trust and intimacy. We talked about developing rapport with the client. Well, ultimately, rapport is the #1 indicator of success of a coaching relationship. So it's huge in terms of what you're doing. So how do you develop trust and intimacy? Well, part of it actually goes back to that earlier category. When somebody knows you have a code of ethics and you follow it and you're accountable to it, that's a huge confidence builder. The coaching agreement you sign with them is a huge confidence builder. And then you as a coach, do you understand the client, who they are, how they think, process, and function, which is coaching presence and being in the moment with them, and then it's adjusting to them and making this process work for them. That all supports developing that trust and intimacy in the relationship. So how are you learning that in your coach training? Then communicating effectively. There are 3 competencies here. First is your listening. And it's almost funny. The irony of listening skills is this. Most of us say, yeah, I'm a pretty good listener. And then if you ask people, hey, do you think others listen well? Most people will say, not so well. So there's a bit of a gap or a disconnect there. So bottom line, what are the listening skills that really make a difference in a coaching conversation? Making sure you know what they are and apply them every time you coach. Powerful questioning. We mentioned earlier, coaching questions are different than the questions asked in any other profession. So what are the questions? How do you formulate effective, powerful questions in that coaching conversation? So having examples of questions, having tips on how to formulate them, practicing that. And then direct communication, saying something in a way that is clear and respectful, that it's to the point, very direct with people. The fourth category of competencies is facilitating learning and results. That involves creating awareness. And think about it, where does creating awareness come in? It comes in from listening and asking questions, that exploration process. And then designing actions where the client's figuring out what they're doing. You're planning the coaching relationship, you're goal setting, and as a coach, you're serving as their accountability partner. So in a coach training, how are you developing those competencies and looking at that? Okay. So that's the 11 core competencies you want to develop. What else do you want to look for in a training program? Well, we mentioned the International Coach Federation, absolutely essential. And yes, you got 300 or 400 choices out there looking at that. An additional, and I like to think of it as a bit of a bragging point for us. To my knowledge, we are the only ICF approved coach training program that is also accredited by IACET, the International Association for Continuing Education and Training, to give continuing education units. And IACET CEUs apply in all different professions. They are what we call a gold standard in adult education and certifications. So very excited to be able to say both of those. Also, for those of you who are in HR, this has been approved by HRCI for your continuing education hours as well. And I do know we see a lot of people that are image consultants and required to have continuing education. We are approved by the Association for Image Consultants International as well. So those accreditations and approvals give you a lot of information in terms of the credibility of an organization and the quality of a training program. So ICF looks at the content of the training program. IACET looks at how the training is designed and delivered. So those are significant considerations. Now, another fun thing to look at, I think, is who else takes the class. So what we're finding is we see a tremendous number of people that are members of the Association for Talent Development. We see a lot of HR professionals, a significant number of financial planners because of the work they do with individuals, a lot of entrepreneurs through NAWBO. I mentioned AICI and members from that. Yes, from the International Coach Federation because of the continuing education people are doing and the credentialing process. We see people through IACET because they know what that means. I see a lot of mental health professionals, counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. Makes a lot of sense. It's a very complementary profession. And for people in mental health that are getting the value of a positive psychology approach, this parallels very nicely with that. We see a lot of consultants because back to the idea of they're finding, hey, if I just tell you what to do, I'm not getting the same impact as when I coach you in terms of you owning the solution and moving forward. And on that same note, people in a project manager role. Now, bottom line, it's people who have a passion for empowering others. So what does that mean? We see leaders, trainers, educators, consultants, managers, HR professionals, project managers, service providers, and business owners. So awesome. All right. Next, what are the opportunities for you in terms of career? So really interesting, a couple of things, and it may be you've seen this information, this research before. First off, Gallup. And that one's been around for a while. I'm guessing a lot of you have seen this one. The number one reason people quit their job is their boss or immediate supervisor. Business News in 2011 during a down economy said 84% of the employees wanted to quit. Wow. Right Management talked about that and said it's more about employee dissatisfaction and discontent than turnover. So how is this a career opportunity? Well, back to the concept of anyone in a leadership role, the way you interact with the people that report to you or are underneath you, etc., makes a difference in your success. So the coaching skills applied in the workplace support leadership. They support employee engagement and in turn productivity. So it's absolutely a powerful opportunity there. In addition to that, as we mentioned earlier, there are jobs that request or require coaching certification, and so it's an opportunity to advance your career depending on what your capacity is. Okay, on a personal level, what are the skills that you're looking to develop? Well, what do you do in every interaction you have? What really makes a difference for you, whatever it is? A big one, of course, is communication skills. That's what we do all day long, right? Our listening, our language, how we say what we say, and the questions that we ask. That's tremendous value to us in all of our interactions. Our people skills, the ability to recognize different personalities in the moment, being present, and then adjusting to them based on who they are. Again, significant factor. Now, goal setting. Having a process for creating change and motivating follow through, that's significant. So these are huge personal skill development opportunities, whether you're a coach or whatever your capacity. So very, very exciting. As far as a business opportunity, how much of an opportunity is this? People want to know, of course, right? So first off, coaching ranges from $100 an hour to $3,500 an hour. Okay, so $3,500 an hour, yeah, you're talking really big, like Oprah Winfrey's coach and that kind of thing. Your median rate is $500. So first off, this does vary depending on the type of coaching you do. If you're a life coach, for example, or a career coach, you more often start out in that $100 an hour range. If you're coaching executives or the C-suite, $500, it makes a lot more sense in terms of what it's going to be. So it does vary based on type of coaching as well as your own background in education, the area you're coaching people in, etc. So that makes a difference. Now, ICF said there is one coach for every 29,000 people in the United States and Canada. So sometimes I have people say, hey, are there too many coaches out there or is there room for more? And it's funny because when you're in this space, we feel like, oh, there's so many of us and that kind of thing. And then when you get outside of our space, no, there are a lot of people that still aren't even sure what it is. So there's lots of room for more coaches. What does that mean in terms of a business? Look at it as an add-on service. So if you do consulting, etc., coaching makes tremendous sense as an add-on service. It also, we're seeing a lot of people started as a part-time business, either on the side from work or as an after career. And then, of course, as a full-time business opportunity, really diving in and going after it. All right, let's look at the program itself. Coaching certification, what's involved? So the Certified Professional Coach program starts with 5 live online classes. The technology is what you're in currently. Here's the big difference. When you're in a class, you will see the list of everybody else that's in the class on your screen, and you'll be live unmuted. In other words, you'll be talking. So during class, you're asking questions, you're answering questions, you're participating in discussion. It's very interactive, and of course we want that in terms of learning coaching. So the series of classes, first class is called About Coaching. That's where we're going to have a conversation about what coaching is, what it isn't, the role of the coach, really knowing how that works, reviewing those core competencies, and that's setting up the conversation you have with clients. And what's important to know is when you complete the program, yes, you're going to have 4 different examples of coaching agreements. Then the second class is on the Code of Ethics. And we have a lot of fun with it because the approach is this. Yeah, you're going to have a copy of the Code of Ethics, and we're going to say, okay, what does this mean to you? Hey, if this happens, how do you handle it? So it's a very dynamic discussion with some really great examples in terms of how to move through ensuring that what you're doing really is in keeping with the coaching Code of Ethics. Then we do a class on understanding your client. It is a ton of fun. Come ready to enjoy and have fun with it. And it's about recognizing people in the moment. How are they thinking? How are they processing what's going on for them right now? And having that understanding and knowing, in keeping with that, how do you adjust to them effectively? From there, we move into the class on communication, talking about specific listening skills that apply in every coaching conversation, how to do that. And then we move into clear, direct language. What is it? How do you formulate it? How is it different? And having specific techniques for developing that kind of communication. And then we talk questions. We'll talk about different types of questions and how to formulate powerful questions. The 5th class is called Focus and Motivation. So we're going even deeper in terms of understanding how clients are processing information, how to ask them questions based on that, and using that, how to empower them so that their goals are real to them and they're motivated to follow through. We also are exploring how specifically they are defining barriers and how they're defining their goals, what they want to achieve, because it makes a difference in terms of them moving towards those goals and achieving them. And in keeping with that, how do we expand their thinking in terms of the possibilities? Now, with each of these classes, you will have a homework assignment. The classes are all 90 minutes long, and you can expect 90 minutes of homework following the class. The first couple of classes, it'll involve research. The next 3 classes, it'll involve actually practicing the techniques that we're talking about. So you have conversations with people, you're interacting, etc. Wherever you're going anyway, you're going to have a chance to practice those. And then you're writing about your outcomes. Then we move into your coaching practicum. So for those of you that are taking a class in a city, a specific location, it's 2 days in that location from 9 to 4. For those of you who are taking the class online, we split that up into 4 half days. We find when it's an online format, that's simply more effective. So that's when you're going to do your practice. You get a chance to be the coach, to be the client. Now, sometimes people say, well, I don't want to be the client. It's like, wait a minute, if we're going to coach other people, we've got to experience what it's like being the coach. And it's a great opportunity on that personal development side. You'll find it's tremendously valuable. You also get a chance to observe coaching. both the coach and the client at the same time, it's really great to be the fly on the wall and watch what's going on both sides of it. So the coaching practicum, of course, that's what we're all excited about. Hey, I want to learn coaching. I want to practice coaching. It's huge and it's a lot of fun, very full in terms of the engagement and what you're doing. At the end of the coaching practicum, you have a case study that you'll complete. It's a fabulous review of everything from the initial conversation with somebody about coaching all the way through dealing with some of the challenges that come up. So in addition to being the review and overview, yes, that serves as your final. It is open book and we do walk through every piece of it with you. Then after certification, on the coach login page on the website, we've got lots of resources available for you. Included with that, there is a recording of a class on the business of coaching and a recording of a class on marketing. So for those of you who do choose to do this as a business, that is great information. And on top of that, every month, all graduates are invited to a Q&A call where you can sign up and join the conversation and ask questions about business and marketing. We're absolutely there supporting that for you. We also have free continuing education. So on our website, if you look under opportunities, you can see there are free webinars. Every month we do a free 30-minute program. Every other month we do a free 60-minute program. So you've got access to continuing education supporting you in your success. Maintaining your certification calls for 12 clock hours every 2 years. We give you 24. We also accept, of course, anything you do through the ICF or anything that's coaching specific. Now the Master Coach Program. For those of you that are going to be a coach and put yourselves out there professionally as a coach, membership in the International Coach Federation makes sense. The Professional Coach Program is your first 30 hours. Your next hours come in the Certified Master Coach Program. So the format for that is very similar. I will say the entire program is online. We have students from all over the world participating in each of these classes. So the first class we do is called Group and Team Coaching. It's awesome. Here's the bottom line. There are many opportunities to expand in terms of benefit for clients, services for clients by offering group and team coaching, and expanding what you're doing as a coach as far as your own business and your work by offering group and team coaching. So we do a class where we're talking about what those are and how they work, and then part of your coaching practicum, you'll see in a minute, is actually doing that kind of coaching. Then we do a class on ethics and agreements. And what we're going to start here is digging deeper into the core competencies. So we're going to talk about do's and don'ts for each of the core competencies. This is supporting your level of knowledge, and it's also fabulous because when you do pursue a credential, there's a test involved, and this is great in terms of helping you prepare for that. So it's fabulous insight. So ethics and agreements, covering the do's and don'ts of those competencies and going deeper with that conversation. Then we move into coaching process. So we talk do's and don'ts for developing trust and intimacy and coaching presence and dig into that further. We move into people and communication, where we talk about the do's and don'ts for listening, for your clear, direct language, and for your questions. And we go further in terms of what these skills mean in your coaching work, in your coaching relationship, and outside of that for your clients. We move then to creating change with confidence, and we're digging further with don'ts and do's for the competencies of creating awareness, then designing actions, planning and goal setting, and accountability. And of course, in that class, we're going to talk about influencing factors, we're going to talk about confidence, and we're going to talk about how do you really create that change. And then we talk time and money coaching. You see, these are influencing factors almost every time, and they're sensitive topics. So as a coach, being comfortable having the conversation with those sensitive topics, and how do you approach that? Now, with these classes, we take your homework and split it in half. You do part of it before class and part of it after class. The idea is, where are you at now? What are you thinking? Where are you going? And then after class, writing about, okay, now what? What'd you get out of that? Where are you taking it, etc. So it really deepens your learning experience. We'll give you questions to answer, and of course, use real examples. You're going to gain more from it. Then the coaching practicum at the master coach level, you're going to do group coaching. So part of the schedule will list group coaching sessions. Everybody in a class has a chance to be the coach for the group, and then you participate in the other groups. So you experience all of that. Then you also are going to have trainer supervised real-time coaching. You will actually interview your classmates and be involved in selecting who your coach is, and you will schedule your coaching sessions where it's the coach, the client, and the trainer, and that's it. So you get dedicated attention and really develop your skills as a coach. Super exciting. At the end, you'll complete a final report on a coaching scenario. That's when you graduate. Now, of course, with all training programs, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. All right. Time. We got to make sure we're giving you what we promised you, and I do realize we've used time. So next steps. First off, I promised something for you. You're giving your time, investing time being here today, so I want to give back on that. I'm going to give you a free 30-minute session. Now, I do have sometimes people say, hey, instead of a coaching session, I want to use it to ask questions or whatever. That's fine too, whatever you want. So how do you access that? I'm going to email you a link to the YouTube recording of this conversation. In that email, I'll say, hey, if you want a 30-minute session, let me know. Reply to the email, and I will send you a link to my calendar. You can click on that link. It'll take you straight into my calendar online. You can pick a day and a time that work for you, put in your name and phone number, and on that day at that time, I will contact you, and you'll have your 30 minutes. So we make it super easy because you get to pick on the schedule. Now, your next step, the application process, filling that out, it's free. It's really great because it's you checking off, okay, this is what's involved in completing certification. It's also great because you're telling us about you and about your interest in certification, which gives you a way to explore it and think about it on paper, and it helps us get to know you when you are in a class. And when you do know which class you want, the way you hold your place in the class is to reserve it and pay for it, and that holds your spot in the class. So I have somebody asking the question, in terms of Skype, we don't use Skype for our online classes unless in the Master Coach class somebody decides to do their group session using Skype. So we use the GoToWebinar format, so it's this technology online for the classes. So hopefully that helps clarify that question. And then I also am saying, okay, in terms of enrollment, so class size is on average 6 people. We will have classes as low as 3 or 4 sometimes, and as many as 18. So that's the range of class sizes. Most of them are in the neighborhood of 6 to 12 people. So that's a typical class size. If you have fewer than 3, are you going to want to have a class? No. It's 3 is your minimum in terms of a professional coach class, so that you really do have a conversation going on. So hopefully that's clarifying that question as well. I do want to open it up to whatever additional questions you have. I'm happy to hang around as long as any of you are here. And I also want to thank you, recognizing many of you have things scheduled. And by the way, I'm getting your notes in the question panel. So yes, thank you as well. So glad this was helpful and gave you good information. Glad you were here. Looking forward to connecting personally and to being of service. So thank you, everybody. Definitely appreciate you being here. And so as people are heading out to other appointments, some of you I see are hanging around. If you want to raise your hand, I'm happy to have you come on live. If you want to enter in a question, I'm happy to take that as well. From what I am seeing in the question panel, it seems we have answered the questions that were submitted both ahead of time and during class. And that's what I'm continuing to get in the notes. All right, let's see, I do have somebody raising their hand. So Barbara, I'm going to unmute you and bring you in live. Barbara, if you'll click on the picture of the microphone in your control panel, at this point you've got yourself muted because I unmuted you. There you go. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can. What can I answer for you?
I wanted to ask, you mentioned about having insurance. Can you just let me know what would be the purpose of having insurance, and possibly what's the cost for having the coaching insurance?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So just like any business person, having insurance is a matter of evaluating your risk factor. Is it required? No. Do people have business insurance? Yes, they do. Just in case, covering them, that kind of thing. So in terms of a profession like this, where we're providing a service, the same holds true. Some people buy insurance, some people don't. The idea is if somebody says, hey, I'm going to sue you based on the service you provided, you've got the insurance to cover you. It's a pro-con. It's you evaluating your risk and your risk tolerance. In terms of cost, it depends, of course, on the type of insurance, on where you're located, etc. So membership in the ICF makes a difference on the price point. And what the level of coverage is makes a difference on price point. I've heard people say anywhere from $300 US to $1,500 US for a year based on all of those factors. So hopefully that's helping with that. Is that covering what you wanted to know?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. And whoever else, if you want to raise your hand and come on live, happy to do that. If you want to type in the question panel, happy to take those as well. And thank you again. So I'm getting some great comments in the question panel. I appreciate that this was valuable to you. That's exciting to me, and I appreciate you saying that. So thank you very much. It does look like we are complete. So everyone have a fabulous weekend. Do let us know how we can be helpful and support your success. So thank you, everyone.